Welcome to Scouting for Growth. Today, I am meeting with Tanguy Touffut, founder and CEO of Descartes Underwriting. A lot of you out there have asked me to talk to Tanguy, so here is Tanguy for you. Tanguy was the CEO of Parametrics and head of security and agriculture as well at AXA. I think, Tanguy, you have been in AXA for over 8 years based on the numbers I've seen out there. And then in 2019, you shaped up Descartes Underwriting as an InsurTech and an MGA working with brokers. And we want to understand why you actually focused on that target market as well. So let's introduce Tanguy. Welcome, Tanguy. Tell us a bit more about you and what got you into insurance.
Thank you, Sabine. Happy to be with you today. It's a big question because there are not so many people dreaming about becoming an insurer when they're like 5 years old. This is something that often arrives by accident. So this is something that is not that common. In my case, I think it was definitely a smooth process. I wanted to find a real purpose, and non-life insurance, working especially on natural catastrophes, is something that is for me highly valuable on a daily basis. We know today there is a storm in the UK, so-called Eunice. There is also a hurricane or a cyclone also in Madagascar. So this is something that is a big challenge for humanity due to climate change. And definitely working as an insurer in that sector is for me extremely rewarding. It's something that I really appreciate. It's also data-driven. I love, I would say, data and new technologies. And I think that the sector is ripe for disruption. So being both working in a tech company in the insurance sector and innovating in the face of climate change is definitely a big motivation driver for me.
So you are a corporate who became an entrepreneur as well, Tanguy. So what got you to make that shift?
I think I would say when after my graduation, I really wanted to launch the company. At that time, I think I was missing a number of skills to be able to be successful. At the same time, when you're a student, of course, you can't afford much. So I wanted to increase my purchasing power. That meant that I started in the consulting industry for good and bad reasons. You understood the bad reasons. But it was something that was important for me already like 20 years ago. Then I think there are, of course, plenty of benefits when you work for a large corporation. You have the resources, you have the expertise, you have strong colleagues, and you have less skin in the game. So you sleep better at night when you work in a large corporation compared to a startup. But at the same time, the scope of things you can do as a startup is actually much wider. Especially today, I would say the venture capital market is quite bullish about the insurance industry, even if the valuations are a bit are decreasing in the USA right now. We all know that, but still there is lots of capital that is available, and actually you can have a long-term view as a startupper. It's not intuitive, but it's a long-term view compared to large groups that have to focus on short-term revenues and basically their profitability. So as a startup, you can invest in the short term as long as the vision is clear in the long term, and you know how to create something big, something efficient, and something tech-driven.
So what got you into parametric? I mean, this is a term I hear a lot. You know, I'm doing quite some work with insurance companies and non-insurer. And interestingly enough, the parametric business model is one that comes up again and again. What got you into parametric from AXA actually to Descartes today?
I think there's lots of confusion about parametric insurance because it's not a line of business, it's not a product. It's more an approach to improve product features. So for me, it's not a means. It's a means. It's not an end. So it was just the result of years of frustration about the insurance sector in the corporate segment. So that's my focus today with Descartes. For example, it takes 550 days in the USA between the declaration of loss and the claim payment. So we can easily understand that customers are poorly served in our space. We also think that the economics is not working that well. So typically, when you give 100 to your insurer, you get 70% in return. So we face a 30% expense ratio in the insurance sector. It's true in the UK, in the USA, in Japan, so more or less everywhere in the world. So we need to find a way to give back much more to our clients. And also there is a big topic about transparency. I think it was amplified by COVID-19. We know that many businesses were convinced that they were covered against the COVID-19 losses they faced, and actually they were covered against epidemics and not pandemics. And of course, I would say for people having no specific knowledge about pandemics, the distinction between the two concepts, epidemics and pandemics, is not that clear. So I would say parametric is a way to address the three challenges: the economics, the claim payments, the claim experience, and the transparency. So that's why we are pushing that approach. But again, our aim is really to offer better product features to be able to improve, I would say, the trust in insurance from our corporate partners and from brokers. But it's again, parametric is not a line of business or a product in itself. So it's something that is quite confusing today.
It is confusing, and it would be helpful actually if you could give a little definition for our layman listener actually as well. Thank you.
So it's quite simple. So basically, you have to use data to, of course, model the risk, but also process the claim payments. So if, for example, we look at wildfires, so it's one of the fastest growing risks in the world today due to climate change. So everybody's aware about the wildfires in California, Oregon, or in Australia, or what happened actually last year in Canada, so close to Vancouver. If you use a parametric approach, basically you will use artificial intelligence, neural networks to be able to understand the locations of the plantations. If you are insuring a large pulp manufacturer, for instance, so you get rid of roads, natural forests, rivers, and then when there is a wildfire, you will use satellite imagery to be able to assess if the area is burnt or not burnt. So actually, instead of having to send 50 loss adjusters on the ground to assess the damage after a big event, you will be able to use images from satellites to process in a very accurate manner the claim payments. So it's really about using data to trigger claim payments in a very smart and efficient way.
So you made a comment around epidemic and pandemic. So how would parametric work in both cases?
But in our case, it's always transparent, so there is no exclusion. So when you say you cover a flood, you cover a cyclone or whatever, it's usually one page describing the data provider, describing basically the different thresholds. Usually it's not binary. So the payout will not be the same if it's a massive flood or a small flood, if it's a category 1 cyclone or a category 5 cyclone. That is quite obvious. But as soon as the event is met, then there is no debate about how much should be paid to our clients. So this is completely transparent. So typically for pandemics, if we look at parametric covers, they could be based on the number of casualties. It could be the number of shops that may be closed in a specific location due to a lockdown. So there are plenty of different ways to build, to structure a product, but there will be some external data that are not manipulable, that you cannot change, that will be used to trigger either a business interruption cover or sometimes a property damage.
Superb. So you're an entrepreneur, Tanguy. Tell us about your founder's journey. You've been, for 8 years in AXA. You were a consultant, you mentioned as well. And now you are leading one of the most respected businesses in Europe. What has been your journey? What has been your lesson learned? What has been your happy moments and less happy moments, maybe?
Well, I think when you launch your own company with co-founders, the team is probably the most crucial part because it's about resilience. Of course, you have ups and downs all the time. You need to convince a number of people to believe in you, to build basically the team you need to perform well. Because when we talk about technology, we're talking about data scientists, software engineers, DevOps, so people that are really building the stack, building the technology that you need to improve your sector. So I would say that's probably the most precious asset, being able to convince people to join you in your journey and to accept, I would say, a less generous package first for a new adventure. So I would say that the first years of an entrepreneur are not that, I would say, easy. You have to work extremely hard. You have to accept, of course, to take a step back and criticize your own way of working. So it's something that you cannot achieve if you are not extremely motivated. And I use the term resilience if you're not able to take hits. I think the other lesson I learned is the fact that there are plenty of conventions in the insurance sector. Sometimes they come from, I would say, they have good reasons to exist, but they were actually created a century ago. So in the insurance sector, as an entrepreneur, you need to break some rules. You need to accept, to identify the rules that make no sense. Of course, you are not breaking the law. You just break some rules, some conventions in the insurance sector. But that's the only way to be able to change the status quo and come up with something new. If you look at parametric, I would say 10 years ago, some people said it's the favor of the month. This is something that will not last. And being able to, I would say, to break some rules about indemnity versus parametric is, I think, extremely powerful to be able to improve the way insurance is built, is designed for all segments, and in our case, for the corporate segment.
So you work at Descartes. You say you're serving the broker. Why the broker? And I'm sure, as you mentioned, you work for the corporate segment. But tell us, why brokers?
Brokers are definitely, I would say, dominant in the corporate segment. It's about 100% of the distribution of corporate insurance products. They are very useful for clients to understand how it works. So for us, we only want to work through brokers. We want to partner with them. We want to become their best allies to be able for them to better serve their clients. I think if we look at the corporate insurance sector, every link of the value chain will be disrupted, except distribution in the next 5 to 10 years. So claim handling will be disrupted, policy issuing will be disrupted. Of course, underwriting is under pressure, so due to the new data sources we can use, but I don't expect distribution to change anytime soon. This is something that I think works well. There is a strong demand from corporations to get advices from brokers. So definitely, we want to partner with brokers. We want to. I know that some companies, and I won't mention them, are going direct, but it is not at all our strategy, and we think it's a mistake.
So you are enabling brokers to become better to serve their customers and also the insurer, and probably ask the right premium and actually drive value. So what do you think the role of the broker is going to be tomorrow? How do you see it evolve using capability like yours?
I think they, today, they are probably in a very challenging position in the sense that there is a hardening market. So insurers are trying to rebuild their margins. So they're trying to increase rates significantly. At the same time, some of their clients, some of the corporations they have in their portfolio are suffering from COVID-19. So there are some sectors that actually are doing great and some others that are suffering from a drop in revenues, sometimes more than 10%. If we take tourism, for example, it's a sector that is suffering a lot, and they are not able to afford an increased insurance budget. So brokers are definitely struggling between the insurance sector and basically their own clients. And for us, we can come up with something innovative that would meet their client budgets. Usually it's with a lower budget, covering more remote events. Typically during the crisis, some companies were more focused on big events that will really have a huge impact on their organization, but would not be in a position to afford to be covered for a small event that actually they could absorb. So for us, during this COVID-19 crisis, I think affordability was probably the main driver, and we worked hard with brokers to come up with something that would be extremely competitive in terms of price through, I would say, streamlined covers, focusing on what matters to our clients. Now with climate change, I think it's not only a one-shot issue with COVID-19. Climate change is completely changing the weather patterns. So there is a sharp increase in the frequency of weather anomalies. So typically, if we take a step back and look at the frequency of floods, wildfires, heat waves, cold spells over the last 50 to 70 years, there is an increase by a factor of 4 to 5 in some regions. So it's really a new world, and brokers have to, of course, educate their clients about that. If we take wildfires, for example, we can expect more and more wildfires in the Nordics, in Europe, so in Norway, Sweden, Finland. And I would say for the timber industry, it's very difficult to say, okay, this is a new risk, knowing that if we look at the past events over the last 50 years, there are not so many. So we have to explain to them that even if there is no historical data to justify their need, if we look at physics, if we look at soil moisture, temperature, and wind speed, actually the risk is becoming more and more important. And that's what we observed typically in Canada last year. We reached above 46 degrees Celsius in Vancouver. This is something that should not happen if we look at historical data. And of course, it led to wildfires in the region. So education will be one of the key challenges of brokers, because again, it's a new world. There are new patterns, and they have to explain that to their clients.
So you have new patterns coming from climate risk, climate change. And so when you look at what your platform can do for brokers, insurers, and customers, corporate customers, how far do you go? Because when I talk to insurers today, we talked a lot about climate risk, but we also talk about urban risk, supply chain risk, cyber and digital risk because of the use of technology. How do you combine all these additional risk when you start looking at the interlinkages between climate and other risk types linked to sustainability?
Well, it's very complex because everything is intertwined. So it's true that You can't only look at one risk separately in some cases. So this is something. First, I would say that the first answer to that is you need a very strong team of data scientists to understand what's happening. So already in our space, so today we have 68 people in Descartes, but we have more than 50 people working only on weather risks, on models, algorithms, or data sources related to weather risks. It could be hail, it could be again a flood, it could be temperature, and we expect to be above 100 just. I'm talking about data scientists and software engineers and DevOps just on weather risks. So I think we will be one of the largest teams in the world, including the top reinsurers, to I would say to invest in the understanding of the risk. Then I think your question is also about the product offering we have to develop to take into account all the new emerging risks and also their I would say their interaction. And it's something that, of course, will be enriched over time. This is a complex process, but at least I would say the first foundations are really about understanding what's happening. And I think that the industry, if we look at the IPCC, if we look at all the researchers in the world working on climate risks, we are just at the beginning of understanding what's happening. And if we look at the forecast of the IPCC 10 years ago compared to what's happening today, they were quite optimistic about actually the trends. And if you look at their new, I would say, forecasts, it's more the worst case scenario they had in mind like 10 years ago. So yeah, I would say that the first thing to do is really to invest in the understanding of climate change. And the second step will be more the product offering to meet that challenge.
That created strategically a change in the way you actually build your team. You select your people and decide how you define Descartes for the future. The reason why I'm asking that question is another question which often comes is about people, culture, talent, and the future of insurance. Are the skills of today going to be relevant for tomorrow? And you already mentioned the massive team you are building around weather and climate-related data scientists, analysis and algorithm development. So what is your lens on that, Tanguy?
I think it's, as I said, it's extremely important to recruit the best team in the industry. Today, I think the new generation of data scientists are really looking for a purpose. So, and I think this is something that we can offer. So we managed to attract people from very prestigious firms like typically Goldman Sachs, because they want to do something in the face of climate change. So we want to keep on, I would say, improving the company in that respect, to become a reference in our space. We want, of course, to reduce our CO2 emissions, and there are some internal projects on that. And I think it's again very important for our people, for our team members. But you can't ask. I mean, everybody is looking for data scientists at the moment. Everybody is trying to hire DevOps and software engineers. So only the company being able to offer, of course, a nice package, but also a great culture, and also the ability to, I would say, to challenge themselves through new technologies. Only such companies will be able to succeed. So it's something that, of course, we are investing in, and I think at Descartes we are quite successful at mixing people from different cultures. So today, even if the company is only 68 people, we plan to be above 150 by the end of the year. We have 20 nationalities. So we have people from Africa, people from Asia, people from Latin, people from North America. And I think compared to the size of the company, we are one of the most diversified and I would say lucky companies in our space. We also have offices in the USA. We have an office in London. We will open an office in Madrid in the next month. In Asia, we have an office in Singapore, one in Sydney, and we are opening Hong Kong. So I think such assets help us attract the best people in our industry. And again, it's the most crucial thing you need to achieve to be successful as a startup in the insurance space.
So success. I would like to talk about success. Congratulations for raising $120 million, I think, recently, Tanguy, with your team, to scale your business to the next level. When you look at your investors, when you look at why they selected you and your team as a winning team, what are the criteria of a successful business today?
For investors, of course, they need to invest in a team first. So they will check, of course, the founders and their aspirations. Traction is something quite obvious. You need to demonstrate your ability to generate revenues. They will, of course, check also the feedback from your partners, so brokers and clients, to understand your value proposition and the fact that actually your renewal rate is extremely high. So people are happy to work with you and they want to actually expand their business with you. And also the level of ambition. Today, I think there is no startup in the corporate insurance space that is growing as fast as we do. And as we want to become a category leader and really break some rules in our space, I think it's extremely attractive for investors. They will, of course, also check, I would say, how we position ourselves towards climate change, because there are plenty of investors trying to come up with some solutions in the face of climate change. And we know that the insurance sector is at the forefront. Mm-hmm. But still, even if the sector is at the forefront, the product offering is not fit for purpose. When we say that, as I said, we need 550 days in the insurance sector in the USA to process a claim payment, we cannot be happy with the results. We need to come up with something that typically at Descartes, we try to be within 5 working days when we have to make a claim payment. This is something that is very important. So investors are looking for all the criteria I described. It's something that is quite comprehensive in the end. For a Series B, that's more what they're expecting to get.
Yeah, no doubt that the criteria are very well, laid out between your annual recurring revenue and the monthly recurring revenue and what they are looking for around the type of client base and how you are going to show how to scale as well. But you also highlighted a very important part of the equation is the people. Now I would like to ask you about future technology. We often hear about metaverse and blockchain and NFTs now. Okay, said, all these digital assets, which will require to be insured at some point, but they also create a lot of waste. How do you deal with that? How do you visualize our world with future technology, Tanguy?
If you're talking about typically the CO2 emissions of blockchain, I think it's a big issue. I tend to be quite enthusiastic about technology. I don't want to be naive, but I always think that when we create a problem through technology, there will be another technology that will solve this problem. So the quantum computing, for example, could be a way potentially to improve a bit the CO2 emissions. I won't comment on that too much, but I always think that there would be a way to come up with more, I would say, efficient solutions. I think it would be very difficult for humanity to completely change their habits. We see how difficult it is just to reduce our meat consumption. We know that red meat is a big topic for CO2 emissions. Making people switch in a couple of months from, I would say, steaks to vegetables is not going to happen, unfortunately, except if we force people in a very harsh way. So we need to find ways, of course, to change our habits, but at the same time to improve the technologies that will actually reduce emissions. I think the European Union decided to consider, for example, nuclear as a green energy. I know there is a big debate across the region. Now, if we just look at CO2 emissions, I'm not talking about all the other consequences of nuclear power plants. If we just look at CO2 emissions, it's true that it's a technology that should help reduce emissions. But again, I don't want to launch a debate, and I'm not qualified to really talk about that. But I always think that new technologies will hopefully deal with the issues that are created by other technologies.
So the raison d'être of Scouting for Growth, Tanguy, is we realize there is a gap around understanding what corporate venturing is outside our little world. And it would be great to hear from you how you see it, how do you see it evolve? So for me, corporate venturing includes scouting for ventures. So finding companies which can collaborate with great corporates to help them change their business, efficiency, innovation, help them identify new products and services, and maybe build game-changing innovations. The other side is building ventures, which is what you've done. And that means, finding potentially corporate venture capitalists able to work with you, able to invest in you, able to actually find a way to change their own mindset to build the next $1 billion they need to generate to sustain themselves in the future. How do you see that happen or happening in the future?
I think, of course, I think that there could be a great, I would say, partnerships between startups and large corporations. There could be some win-win situations. Of course, it depends on the maturity of the startup. But if we talk about the climate change for the insurance sector as a whole, it's just too big to be addressed by startups. And we know that insurers are struggling to change their processes, at least in a quick manner. So I would say building partnerships is definitely something that will be, for me, quite precious to be successful. And again, it should be you should find a way to take the best of both worlds. The limits, of course, would be if you take the worst of both worlds. So I would say the bureaucracy you may have within large organizations, and I would say sometimes the usual I would say issues with startups. If you combine both of them, of course, it has no value. So it should be smart partnerships that will generate, of course, profits and revenues for both parties. And I think there are a couple of examples. We are working very well with a number of large insurers. We have, I would say, a very strong business model with them, beneficial for all of us. And I think this is the only way to go. You can't change an entire sector just by yourself. You need others to achieve that.
Yeah, it's all about the ecosystem, bringing new capabilities which synergistically can deliver value for each party of that ecosystem and create better value for the customer. Tanguy, you became an entrepreneur. Would you have thought you would become an entrepreneur when you were younger?
I think so, because it's probably more intense. I would say if you believe in yourself, if you believe in something, it's easier to. I mean, if you have like also people being able to work with you, if you able to find co-founders, I think it's a very it's a very say intense life you can live, and it's probably more you can get more satisfaction than within a large organization. Of course, you may sleep bad at night. You may actually look like 20 years older very soon. But in terms of satisfaction, it's I think something that you is difficult to achieve, at least within a large organization. That's my point of view. Of course, it depends on your experience. It depends on what you want to achieve in life. But I would say entrepreneurship can give a meaning to your life. Yeah. Working in a large organization, you can achieve that under certain circumstances, but it's more, I would say it's more difficult.
Yeah, I so much agree with you. You know, like you, I was probably 18, 20 years working with corporate world and make the shift 6 years ago. And often when I even talk to the partner I work with every day, I said, for me, it's the most fulfilling part of my life to actually work with startups and grown-ups and scale-ups every day and learn from them, because I wish I had all those great ideas, which I will never have on my own. And being able to mingle with some great mind like yours, actually, Tanguy, is actually rewarding. It's actually, hopefully, achieve my world purpose. So what will be your last word of wisdom you could share with maybe, you know, those young entrepreneurs who may want to do like you?
Oh, it's a very difficult question. I think people should not hesitate to launch their company, because in the end, if you fail, your ability to bounce back is quite good. I mean, now corporations value people that have launched a startup. Maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people would have considered you as a crazy person that could not actually work well with others in a large organization. But it's not true anymore. I think large corporations, I mean, large groups are trying to recruit more and more startuppers. So you have nothing to lose in the end. And when you have nothing to lose, your ability to succeed is probably higher.
Ability to succeed. And you mentioned it earlier during our conversation. It's all about resilience. And I see it every day. People who may have worked in a startup environment are a bit more hustling, and they are much more innovative in the way they will solve the problem, but they will solve that problem. And sometimes it just takes time for those who come from corporate environments to actually get their head around that they don't have any more support system to do things for them. So, Tanguy, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Probably LinkedIn is the easiest way. Otherwise, Twitter to some extent. But LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Perfect. So if you want to find Tanguy Touffut, check LinkedIn. I think the name is Tanguy Touffut on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for your time. We've discovered Descartes aujourd'hui. We have discovered Descartes Underwriting aujourd'hui, and so much grateful for your time today.
Merci beaucoup, Sabine.
À bientôt.
À bientôt.
Bye.